All right, we are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar, What Talent Wants, Creating a Winning Candidate Experience. I'll introduce myself first. My name's Erin. I'm on the webinar team at Workable. And now I want to introduce you to our wonderful speakers. Kelly, would you mind saying a bit about yourself? Kelly, you might be on mute.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I'm Kelly. Very happy to be here. Thank you for joining Matt and I and Erin today. I am been hired for a little over 3 years. I head up the people team, which consists of the hiring side as well as the HR side. Been doing this in the Silicon Valley for about 20 years. First of all, at later stage companies like Intuit and Yahoo, and the last 9 years or so, heading up people teams at early stage companies, which is my favorite stage. Very intense, very chaotic, very fast. It's the best. I was a client of Hired for 2 years over at GitHub before coming on over to join. Love the product, love the team, and happy to be here and share some of our experiences and our advice today with Matt.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, Kelly. My name's Matt Buckland. I am the Vice President of Customer Advocacy at Workable, which is a strange title, but I followed, I think, your path where I was a client of Workable. I used Workable at 4 or 5 different companies. Prior to that, I think I've been in recruitment for about 16 years now, which is far too long. And I'm here to tell you about all of the horrible things I've done to candidates throughout that time, and how I've generally misused and abused their good favors. I have not done that to every job, of course, but worked in companies large and small like yourself. So Facebook, Criteo, Bloomberg, from high frequency trading shops out of Chicago to very tiny VCs in London doing seed funding. So all over the place and all over the world. So seen a lot of good and bad in candidate experience, which I'm pleased to share with everyone today.
Great, thanks guys. All right, so just for the agenda, we have a couple things to cover today. First, we're going to jump into why candidate experience is important, lay some groundwork, and then we're going to talk about factors that can impact your candidate experience and what the real candidate motivators are. After that, we're going to get into the real meat of the webinar, hot takes with Matt and Kelly. They're going to go over myths versus truths, trends, and just some of their opinions and things they've learned along the way about doing candidate experience well. We do have Q&A at the end, but I really encourage you to submit questions as the webinar progresses, because we'll be taking breaks to answer some throughout the webinar. So with that, we are actually going to start with a poll. We want to know if your company has ever experienced poor feedback about candidate experience. So you should see that launching on your screen right now. I'm going to keep that open for about 20 seconds. So go ahead and answer, and then I'll show the results with everyone. About 5 more seconds. All right. So this is really interesting. It looks like most people have actually received poor feedback, but you're not alone. No candidate experience is perfect. And then the people who are unsure, that's really interesting too, because it means you're probably not measuring, or there are definitely ways you can start improving. Matt and Kelly, do you have anything to add to this?
No, it's very interesting how it's mixed, and I was initially surprised to see the number of unsure, but then I thought about it, and it is one of those things where it's hard to follow, right? And I think we'll talk about that, at Hired. That's what we do, right? We coach and we give clients and candidates coaching on this stuff, and people are talking about your candidate experience all the time, whether you know it or not. And so I agree that it's hard to tell, and so I appreciate the amount of unsures on there.
I'm surprised at that 20%. There's a lot of people who have been doing this all really brilliantly already. So I want to hear from them in the polls as well. I want questions from them and comments from them. Because I've certainly thought I've been doing it brilliantly and thought I've been on the pace with everyone, and then they're still upset come the end of it. So I want to hear from that 20%.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, guys. All right, so let's keep moving. Let's kick things off with a couple stats. I think numbers like this really help to understand how important candidate experience is to successfully attracting and hiring good people. So here we see 60% of job seekers report having received a poor candidate experience, and 72% of those respondents shared that a bad experience online or with somebody directly. So a bad candidate experience will make candidates lose respect for you, both as an employer and a brand, which is why it's so critical to really work on this and keep improving. Responding to every candidate's application is probably the easiest way to solve this complaint, but crafting a good candidate experience involves way more than that. It's a total mindset shift that focuses on respecting candidates' time and designing your candidate experience to be as painless as possible. Which leads us into the first section really nicely, factors that impact your candidate experience.
Awesome. So happy to kick this off. And again, this is, meant to be a very interactive process. Nothing worse than kind of a boring webinar where you're listening half asleep. So Matt and I are going to banter back and forth and hopefully keep you entertained with some real stories. And we'll hand it over to Erin pretty often to answer questions. So I know hopefully you all came here to get some specific advice and some answers to help you today, if not tomorrow, but immediately. So please jump in and throw those questions in, and we'll make sure to get to as many as possible, if not all of them. So we wanted to kick off with a few, factors that do impact the candidate experience. I think it's pretty clear that not everyone's experience across companies, even within a company, even within roles within a company, are cookie cutter, and things change and shift and morph as they should, depending on how a company is growing and changing and evolving, what roles you need, what level of role, what geographies, etc. And so Matt and I kind of broke this down to three very, very simple buckets that you might want to, not take a look at once and put it on the shelf, but really look at every month or every 2 months by role, etc., to help you craft the right experience across your entire company as you're scaling. So the first consideration is really company demographics, right? A company that's, hiring 400 people in 1 year is going to probably have a different experience than a company who's only hiring 20, right? I mean, I think that speed to hire, that volume, the locations that you're hiring, you really want to take that into consideration, because if you're hiring 5 people, right, in New York only next year, that can be a very different experience that you would set up versus, again, hiring 400 people in London, in Dublin, in New York, in San Francisco, etc. And so some of these things are really to take into consideration with that, and how, again, the location and the pace. And Matt, I mean, you're out in London as well. I'd love to hear, based on your experience at Facebook and being in London, what are some of those demographic differences you've seen when you've been architecting the experience on the recruiting side?
Yeah, I think I've been quite lucky to travel quite a fair bit. So I've recruited in Australia and across Europe and India and China a little as well. Very, very different expectations of what a good experience is for people. I think back to assessment centers in India, where it was like a warehouse with thousands of people there, and it was numbers, not names, until you got to the third stage. So you've got all of these different things, like the expectation is in someone's mind before you even approach them, before they even know you exist. I think one of the biggest things that I've encountered is the difference in notice periods and how long people are actually left alone in your process at the end. I think back to anything from 1 month to 3 months now. If you're out in the States, it's sort of, you can be employed at will, and you can have like a 2-week notice period, which is great for the recipient of the talent. You're scaling fast. You can just go, hey, you're hired, you start next week, that kind of stuff. In the UK, it's like, hey, you're hired, see you in a month, maybe 6 weeks, I don't know. And then in France, for example, it's, hey, you're hired, see you next year, that kind of stuff, because the notice periods are so long. So I think one of those things, it's being aware of those things that you can't control as well as the things that you can control. And those geographical distances will really trip you up as well.
Right. I've seen that as well. I mean, and it's really being clear with the candidate up front, and even in the same company, right? Hiring salespeople who are sitting all over the world, it could be a very different candidate experience by geographic distribution alone than hiring engineers in that same company, which might be in one location or maybe two locations. I think for me, just being upfront with the candidate about what that experience is going to be, right? So if they come into your company and all of a sudden they're expecting to meet 6 people in person that day, and they're meeting 2 people in person and 4 people that are on video in Australia and London, you want to make sure that they're understanding that's going to be the case, right? Are they comfortable with that? Have they done that before? And helping to set them up for success and making them comfortable with that. And so again, just to wrap up the demographics, and please throw questions in here. I know this can be a tricky one, especially as you're scaling and changing, but having awareness of those demographics and then architecting your experience around it, communicating that and the whys, I think can be something that can be easily overlooked, especially as you're growing really, really, really quickly. The second buckets are for roles and skill sets. Again, you might have different experiences in your company for different roles, levels, skill sets, and that's okay, right? But the key is where do you want to be consistent throughout that experience, no matter if you're hiring a VP of sales or an office manager, right, or a financial analyst. But how does that differ, right? And so a lot of our processes for roles that are higher level, right, leadership type roles that train, influence, impact a lot of the company. We'll do a lot of presentation style format, informal conversations, simulated meetings, which you may or may not do for like an engineer, for example. And so really, again, if you're starting out or you're in charge of architecting this for your company, just take a look at the different types of roles and the skill sets, and don't be afraid to modify that and customize it, right, for that specific role. I don't know, Matt, if you have any ads or thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think at the moment, I think to start thinking about that is before you actually get involved with the candidate as well. So get that experience locked down so you can tell the candidate about it before it's going to happen. That will get you the most points, because the biggest thing that was going to generate fear is that uncertainty. It's the unknown for a candidate. It's like, okay, I'm going into this process. What's it going to be like? And they have all their preconceived notions of what an interview is like. I'm going to sit at a table. There'll be a panel, and I'm going to get stared at. And then you come along and say, hey, you're going out for coffee with the CEO. Those things are like vastly different experiences to sort of get yourself in the right mindset for. I think we run the risk of we have high value candidate experience and low value candidate experience, even within the same organization. So as you said, the COO, you're hiring a COO, suddenly you're rolling out a red carpet. And that feels very different than when you're hiring a receptionist and you go, there's lots of them, I won't bother. However, there's a sort of a midpoint in that candidate experience that you have to empathize with the candidate and get to that point.
Yep. And the last thing I'll mention, and again, we'll go to questions soon, so please poke at us or disagree or test us, but consistency in your role and those skill sets is also important, right? It's one thing to say we have a great process, everyone's lined up, we got candidates coming in, and those candidates hear very different things across that interview team about what that role is, what it's going to be like, what's expected, what are the experiences and the skill sets, and they leave more confused than they did coming in. That's something that I've heard a lot in my career in doing this, and it's a very quick way to kind of ensure and really raise that recipe for success is get that interview team together before anyone comes in. Yep. And make sure that consistency and messaging and all those expectations are there, because that's the quickest way to turn off a candidate that I've seen.
Yeah, we used to call it a wash up at the end, and then we could never really come up with a good name for what happened at the beginning, which was to grab everyone in the same team and say, look, we're seeing this person, this is the role they're going for, this is the context of that team. Is everyone okay with that? Everyone knows what they're going to ask. And then having that be a sort of a uniform process across other people that you're going to interview for the same role.
Yep, we're very cultish here at Hired. We say pre-briefs and debriefs all day long, right? Pre-briefs before anyone comes in, debriefs after they've come in, recalibrate, right? This interview team is a team, and you got to make sure that you're moving along with them. The last bucket here, and I'm just watching the clock as we go, and then we'll go to questions, is the culture and the brand. And I will talk about, right, the Hired Brand Report and, feedback that we got from the thousands of candidates on the Hired platform after this. But the culture and brand is something that candidates are watching for, right? More now than ever. And they're listening for consistency between what you've told them, you are, how you work, how you behave, the type of values that you're looking for, and any type of talent. And they're listening for that across every interviewer, right? And it's almost easier to see discrepancies in the culture and the brand across an interview team than it is skill sets, right? And so a lot of the feedback we hear is, when I came in, I actually felt what you told me I would feel versus the opposite. And so making sure that this experience is very consistent as well, and you're actually, eliciting who you are, who you say you are in that process, super important.
Yeah, and as recruiters, I'd say don't be afraid to push back on people if you feel that they're not holding those values as well. So we have a duty to candidates. This is what I'm going to keep thumping now, that we should actually be monitoring that. We're coaches for the candidate, but we're marshals internally as well. So I think back to an experience I had where we just had a really negative interviewer. So it was just a big downer in the middle of this process. And suddenly it's like, well, no one wants to work here because of that guy. So you are allowed to change that by all means. I think if you have someone who's not living up to those values, not doing things the way you want, you can by all means push back on that person as well. The recruiter owns the process in the perfect world.
And we'll talk about this later, but I'll end this and we'll go to questions. Aaron, is that connection, if you're a recruiter or you lead recruiting or whatever you do in recruiting, if you don't have a relationship or connected with the HR side, right, an HR business partner, someone who's, if you're a smaller company, an HR manager, someone who has their finger on the pulse of the talent and the values and kind of the pockets of culture in the organization, do that, right? Because to Matt's point, you can avoid some of those, unintended kind of negative or areas that you don't necessarily want to hide, but you want to make sure that you're architecting, right, the best team to represent who your company is. And sometimes in recruiting, we're not as close to that. So getting those relationships tight can be actually really advantageous.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We've actually had some really great questions come in so far. The first one, I think you guys are going to like. It's, what's your experience with brutal honesty with candidates, especially for rejections? For example, telling them they've switched jobs too often.
Do you want to go first, Kelly?
Yeah, why don't you go first, Matt?
This is a myth later, and this is one of your myths or truths.
Yeah, are we going to hit this later, or should we? We'll say a little bit about it now. I'm happy being honest with candidates as long as you can back it up. And there's a brutal honesty, which is that my truth might not be their truth. So there are some things which are absolutely concrete. You can't get away from. You failed the technical test. Here is how you failed the technical test. There. You didn't fit our culture and values. You're not a personality fit. You're not going to, that's a little bit shakier. And I think some people see that as a way of sort of dismissing someone who perhaps was a fit, but someone didn't really quite like, and it's a bit wishy-washy. At that point, are you being brutally honest, or are you just giving them your truth? So I think with the brutal honesty, I'd look at the honest thing you're saying and see if it's really honest. Is it authentic to you? Is it authentic? Would it be authentic in a wider context? So there's this kind of way of like taking a third position and saying, okay, I want to be on the receiving end of this. So I would say, yes, be honest. Yes, be authentic, but be empathetic as well. I'm going to keep saying the word empathy throughout this. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm going to have a swear jar for empathy. Every time I say it, I owe someone $1.
So my two things there, and anyone at Hired who's on the line probably knows this, my HR right-wing neurotic side doesn't come out very often. But one thing I'd say is, if you're going to have those conversations, I'd recommend to have them verbally. Two reasons, right? One, more important than the second, is in Slack or email, and we know this, things can become misinterpreted. Writing is hard. It's hard to get out tone, intent, message perfectly as it's in your mind sometimes in writing. It's dangerous when you're doing that external to a candidate, because if that's in writing, there's kind of maybe a legal thing there. So I would really, really have those conversations verbally. And if you're getting into the wishy-washy, as Matt said, we just had an experience here actually. try to objectify that as much as you can. It's very easy to objectify a technical test, right? Yes or no, right or wrong. It's hard to objectify behaviors and judgment. And so as much as you can keep asking yourself why, right? They're not a personality fit, why? They're not a culture fit, why? What happened? What did they do? And we've given that feedback, right? It's hard, for example, it's hard to elicit who you are, what you believe in, what you care about, right? At Hired, passion, acting like an owner, clarity on the mission is one of our biggest values. And it was very hard to get that from this candidate. And so we were able to explain that in a way that's not just like, we didn't like your personality, which is big red button.
Awesome, thanks guys. And we have another question here that I think is really going to resonate with a lot of people, since a lot of companies are hiring remote workers now, but they're wondering, how do we build candidate experience over the phone if we're offshore? Kelly, why don't you start off with this one if you feel comfortable?
It's a great one, and I fully support that. I think whether you're hiring remote, flexibility in the workplace is key, right? I took interviews from home on Friday, so it doesn't matter if I'm in India or I'm in Redwood City, California, and really making sure that we're being inclusive with video. I think you're seeing more and more, right? This webinar, remote video conversation is kind of the norm now. And so making sure that folks know how to talk on video, making sure that candidates are comfortable with how that's going to happen. Time zone, right? Clarity and being sensitive around time zones is another key part of that. If folks are uncomfortable doing test runs, right, with your interview team and pre-briefs and having a lot of conversation on video, practicing answering questions and kind of engaging that way. And the same with the candidate. I mean, we've had candidates who are uncomfortable with that, and we've had practice runs with them, right? And so your goal on the recruiting side is to set that person up for the most success, without patting them, but making the playing field level and really that equality piece of it. And so whatever accommodations and things you can do to be more inclusive and practice that, to create that seamless experience, the better it is.
Yeah, I'd echo all of those points. I think the one thing they would miss out on in a remote interview process is perhaps all the care and attention that you might give them sort of on an interview day when you're ferrying them around from room to room. Do you want a glass of water? Are you okay? And in the past, I've seen it work really well where the recruiter has scheduled 5 minutes between interviews, and it's the same video with the recruiter and the candidate. And it's just saying, how did that go? Was that okay for you? Don't cry, it's okay, he's always like that, or whatever it is that they're saying. You'll be fine, carry on, don't leave, whatever it is that they're saying. But you're picking up on that. You're still getting a personal connection as well, which sometimes if you're just sat there going, okay, 5 minutes for the next interview, straighten the tie, carry on, you won't get. And I think it's those things. So schedule that time, as you said. The brilliant thing, scheduling sort of first pass at a technical test or a technical interview, those sort of things. I would make sure that your interviewers know that it is a remote position and that it is going to be, they should be as friendly to that person. The location is remote, the people involved shouldn't be remote, I'd say. So make sure that they're keeping up that sort of goodwill to the person.
Everything you can do to keep that process, right, as natural and that environment as natural as possible, the better.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We're going to move on to the next section now. What are the real candidate motivators? And Kelly is going to kick it off.
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of great questions in this section as well. So I'll kind of, there's only 2 slides here, and then we'll jump into some meat of everyone's questions. So Hired, as you probably know, if you work with us, whether you're a client, company, or a candidate on the platform, we ask for a lot of feedback, right? We get a lot of salary data. We talk about experiences. We ask candidates, thousands of candidates, what their biggest motivators are when applying, right? So when they're looking at companies, what do candidates care about? When they're even considering pressing the button to apply or sending an email, inquiring about a job, like forget about actually going on site and engaging, but the things that they're looking for up front, that they're looking for on your values page or your company page or their back channel references and talking to people that work at your company, right? These are them. And it's probably not a surprise It's very probably easy to understand. Like, yeah, that makes sense. Much harder to implement, right, on a day-to-day basis. Much harder to elicit and present during your candidate experience that you're creating in very authentic ways. So just knowing these 5 things, I think, is a great almost roadmap for your teams if you're just starting out or you're looking to revamp or re-architect or improve, right, your experience. Start here and just kind of ask your company questions around comp and benefits, right? Are we transparent? Are we competitive, right? These are basic needs that candidates are looking for. On the benefit side, they're looking for benefits that are more holistic to their lives, right? And so in other words, people's work lives and personal lives are becoming more and more overlapped. It's not a separate thing anymore. And so the more you can look at benefits to help improve quality of life, the better. Culture is obviously a must, right? Candidates are wondering who you are, if you are who you say you are, and if you're clear on that, right? And so we'll talk more about culture a little bit later, but it's important to be very clear on that. And we can't be all things to all people, right? And I don't think you want to be all things to all people because that's a big mishmash. And so being clear on who you are, and again, that interview team, as we talked about, arming them to articulate that and being consistent about that is critical, because that's what candidates are listening for. New skill sets, right? We all know that, especially the younger generation of workers, they want to do 50 different things. They want to get promoted 4 times in a year, right? They want to feel like and show that they're learning, growing, and getting more breadth, right, in what they're doing. And so offering that and talking about that is important. The challenging technical problems, right? We hear it all the time, especially if you're interviewing or working with engineers in your companies. They want to do hard things, they want to do them well, and they want to keep doing them and feel good about doing them. That's critical too. And then of course the team, which ties to culture, right? Are you consistent? Are they feeling that authenticity? Are they feeling the values and the environment in which they're going to come join? And then lastly, and I'd love to hear Matt's thoughts on this, these things are not the same for everyone. Right. So if Matt and I filled out these 5 things, our percentages might be very different across. And so how are you, personalizing this for candidates, right? Even for the same job, Matt and I both might be interviewing for, an account executive role, but we have very different things that matter to us. And you're still able to customize that, whether it's in an offer letter, whether it's in your conversations, whether it's in this. And so we'll talk about valuing the whole human later, but talk to these folks as if you're helping them with their world and their lives, not just the job, right? Because these things change based on where people are in their lives.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that happened in the last sort of 30 years, when I think back to how my parents were getting jobs and stuff like that, it was, what can we extract from you, this company? We will extract labor in return for cash. And those things just don't exist anymore. Those aren't the jobs you get. I don't think my parents understand my job. I'm not sure I do some of the time. So what chance have they got, right? It's interesting to me how the results of the survey here map really nicely onto Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Everyone in HR is done with Maslow, I know, but we can take some of these things off the table before we even have to consider them as experiences. So we're going to have that same argument. In your job ad, if you have the chance, if your company is willing to put the salary in the job ad. That way it's off the table. But you don't have to have that debate. It's not a bait and switch for the candidate. Tell them the salary that you're going to give them. Team, for example, you can link to people they could work with in the job ad. You can say, this is the team lead. Here's his LinkedIn. Go and have a look at this stuff. So there are these ways of kind of front loading the experience for a candidate where you're actually going to end up with, oh, wow, I know so much more about this already, and I'm not having to have it explained to me. Because remember, before you touch the person, exactly like Kelly said, before you're on the phone with them, before they even hit that apply button, they're already having an experience. And it's probably not the one you want them to. They're already having it. If you've got a dodgy website or a really cheesy careers page with the CEO digging a tree because you're so committed to the environment and it looks really hackneyed, they are having that experience. So don't make your job to go in and change that. You can get ahead of it by using these things.
Yeah, and again, these seem very simple, and I care about this a ton, is architecting an organization, culture, brand, kind of that authenticity of the internal and the external experience. We did a webinar on that recently, but this is kind of like the roadmap. If you're starting from scratch or you're looking to reorient to try it, and you'll kind of see it. It seems simple, but when you're trying to do it inside and out, making it happen and making it consistent, it's a lot of freaking work. But if you can do it well, you're way far ahead. If we go to the next slide, Aaron, these also came from our survey at Hired, and these are essentially a little bit different. These are the hooks, right? To Matt's point, candidates are looking for those former 5 things to even decide to throw in their hat, throw their hat in the ring. These are the things that make them keep wanting to talk to you, right? These are the things that make them come on site, that make them start to slowly become very excited about your company and the role. If I take the 5 and go top to bottom, then I'd love to go into some questions. I'm sure there's a lot of questions around these 2 slides and how to make them real. One, the first 2 really tie to that transparency. And so as Matt said, that salary, the work experience, right? That's what we kind of show on the Hired platform, is salary ranges and offers before someone even speaks to that company, to get that kind of out of the way, so you can focus on the more qualitative stuff that doesn't necessarily matter more, but might be harder to get at, the better. So I think that's kind of the new norm, is a lot more transparency around salaries, experience, expectations. And you can do that, foremost, as Matt said. The personalization is also critical, right? And so I've had folks on my team go to lengths and actually write, an email in Russian before, to actually get someone's attention, which is amazing, right? That the templates and the kind of hello, X, come talk to us, people just delete them, or they don't even take the time to delete them anymore. They just ignore them fully. And so the more you can actually target your search, and again, spend more time on less people, to get them excited and engaged and talk about them as an individual and why you want them to come on, the better. The company name obviously ties to brand. Whether you know it or not, there's brand out there. We'll talk about this. Candidates are talking about you, whether you know it or not. Your own employees are talking to people outside the company. And so there's a brand out there, and as much as you can actually control that, and make it consistent, which I think is the hardest piece. How do you get folks to say consistent things about your company over time? That's critical too. And then obviously real experience. So anyone will take the first 4 and throw them out the window if they hear differently from someone they trust inside the company, right? And this is kind of like that engagement survey question we all love, is would you recommend, blank as a great place to work? And so again, these are things that you can build upon on top of the 5 things that were kind of the boilerplate roadmap that we talked to before. And again, these are real candidates, tech talent on the platform, that are saying what they're looking for. So I don't know, Matt, if you have any ads on that, or disagreements or experience.
No disagreements. We're good at the moment. I think there's a couple of things I already said about the salary range up front. The personalized messaging is something that I find really interesting. It's very easy to make it creepy and go too far. I've received messages where someone has looked me up on Instagram and they comment on my dog and stuff, and it's like, he's a cool dog, but I don't want you to comment on him in a like, hey, do you want this job? Nice dog. It's like, what has that got to do with anything?
Of a dog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how's Diego? He's lovely, thanks. It's a bit weird. But the personalized messaging that I have seen work are things like when I've approached developers and said, look, where I saw they were a Java developer in a bank, but their thesis at university was on computer vision in a completely different languages. And I'm like, that's something you've chosen to do. This is something you're doing for money. I'm going to target you for this computer vision job and say, because I've seen your thesis is about this. I looked you up on Google Scholar and I found this, and it looks like your field, it looks like your expertise, it looks like something you'd be passionate about. Is that right? Ask them the question, and then you get that really kind of personalized. That's personalization, not hi Bob, because you know his first name. That's not personalization. And again, it's really acknowledging that the candidate is actually quite intelligent in all this and will know at the drop, just straight away looking at if this has been something that's been sent to 10,000 people. And because you're still doing the same thing, it's that communication from top down. Hello, you, I have a job for you, that kind of stuff. And yeah, if they have a friend or a family member who's worked there and your place is a terrible place to work, just don't try lying, because just give up. Because they're going to throw everything away.
If they have a friend or someone that works at it that loves the company, have them personalize the message, right?
Oh, yeah.
Offer to give them a draft, etc. But we kind of view Hired as 300 recruiters here. So
Yeah, the recognizable company name is an interesting one as well, because sometimes that can work against you. I used to phone people up for Facebook and say, "Hey, I'm calling from Facebook," and they go, "What would I do there? It's already done." It's like, because they just thought it's a website, right? It's done, it's finished. And then, but that's a great opportunity, because it's like, at first it's a negative, and then you have to take that opportunity to turn it around and say, well, actually, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this. Maybe we want you to go and work on Oculus, maybe we want you over here. But it's all of this. Everything is this opportunity. So even if you have that objection, it can still be tweaked a little bit.
The last comment on the recognizable name, it is something, right? Because I live in the peninsula in Redwood City. I take the Caltrain up to San Francisco. I wear, the Hired hoodies a lot, and people say, "Oh, Hired, I know Hired. It's great. I love the thing, And the second is to use alumni. I think one of the best ways to create a really positive brand and a recognizable name is to be a great company to be from, right? This piece of not thinking that ever, like to your point, Matt, that our parents worked at companies for 50 years. It's not the case anymore. People leave after 2, 4, 5 years. They go on to do great things. And if you can still be a great company to be from, it's not just your current colleagues in your workforce, but it's the former workforce that also makes a company great. So, Erin, how can we help?
Awesome. That was great, guys. So I'm just going to do one question this time. We will still have the Q&A at the end, but this one is something I have heard other people struggling with. It's, how do you recommend adding salary to job postings? How do you be transparent about that? Should you do a specific amount, a range, a minimum?
It's a great question. I can lead off. So we do ranges. Yeah. For sure. It's a whole nother webinar and a whole other topic. You can, LinkedIn me anytime. I think compensation philosophy and compensation decisions are super personable and personal. Market data is one kind of multiple factors that we consider when doing that. And so I definitely love a range, just to keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, totally a range. You're setting up a negotiating position. You're not setting up a price tag. So keep your options open a little bit. They're always going to think it's the top of the range. So the educative process in it is to talk them off the ledge a little bit and say, look, this is our ideal person. How many of these 20 things do you actually excel at? Okay, well, if you don't excel at that one, that's something you could learn here. That's what we can teach you. That's a good. So if you don't hook them straight away with just that salary, you're hooking them with the learning opportunity as well, which, as we've seen, is one of those 5 factors.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Let's move on now to the real meat of the webinar, the hot takes. So I think we're going to jump in with Matt.
Yeah, so when we thought about this webinar, we wanted to go through and look at some of the myths that people have about candidate experience, about how it's for some people, it's something they sort of think it sprinkles on the top. They do, they have this great process, and then they think, oh, candidate experience. Let's just do the bare minimum at the end. Let's make sure we offer them a glass of water, and that's done. It's like, no. It's so much more all-encompassing than that, and it can be the difference between them saying yes and no. So what we've done, we've gone through. I think we've got a few of these. Some will be shorter, some will be longer. Some you'll agree with, some you'll disagree with. Some we'll probably disagree with. But yeah, let's jump to the first one, and we'll get an impression of what it is. So this is something I hear all the time, and that's that passive candidates are better than active candidates. So this makes me so angry. This is bullshit, for want of a better word. I have never had a hiring manager where you submit the CV and they go, oh, did they apply or did you find them? They don't care. They literally do not care whether you crawled across broken glass for them or whether the person walked through the door and said, hey, do you have any jobs? They are more interested in this point. This is something that we do to ourselves in the recruitment community, where we have a bias towards, if it's taken our own effort to find the person, we think they're of a higher level. And this is something that we have to get rid of. It's something that was sold to us through third-party agencies, that kind of recruitment where, all the treasured talent, that kind of stuff. This is so not true. And if you reject people or you think that they are less because they have applied or because they aren't currently in work or anything like that, I mean, we want them to apply. We spend all this thought trying to get people to apply. And then we go, oh, yeah, but here's this one guy I found and he responded to a message on LinkedIn, so he must be better. Absolute nonsense. What do you think, Kelly?
No, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. So two things for me. I know we have a bunch of these. They're kind of like lightning rounds, so I'll keep it quick. And then you got
I'll go faster.
now the audience can dig in after if they want to disagree or kick us. The hired product is based on high intent. Every great engineer on our platform is looking, and they say they're looking, so no arguments there. I think the more broader piece for me, just doing this for a while now, is again, the 50-year tenure, it's gone. I mean, the average tenure for anyone now and kind of VC backed high tech is 18 months, 24 months if you're lucky, and that's okay, right? These kind of tours of duty and these things are happening, and I feel like most everyone's kind of active now, and I think we have to change the mindset on that.
Go for it. What have we got next? Improving candidate experience adds unnecessary steps that hurt time to hire. It does if you do it wrong. It's my very, very hot take. So I've seen it done very badly where people add in, oh, they must have sort of an hour with me and another person who's unrelated to the role they'll do because they need to understand us better and they want to, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, are you doing it for the candidate or are you doing it for yourself? And if you're doing it for the candidate, then do it. If you're doing it just for yourself to make yourself feel better about hiring someone, don't do it, because then you're not being appreciative of their time. You're wasting your own time. If then you've taken them out on this grand lunch and then it comes back and they go, oh, they failed the technical test, by the way, and you're already 3 more interviews down the line. I mean, it's a process. You still have to get through it with people, but be appreciative of their time. I think you can do nice things and you can automate some of the things in this. So automation doesn't necessarily mean it's impersonal. And I think we're going to come on to that as well. So I'll shut up.
Yeah, no, interesting. Slightly maybe a controversial point of view, but again, doing this for a long time, I think 10 years from now, time to hire is going to kind of be moot, right? I mean, if you think about time to hire, it's between when you open a rec and you get someone right in the seat. And it's that open the rec mindset that I think is going to change. We've all been in companies where it's like finance says yes, finance says no, it's open, it's closed. We open it, we open it only when we need someone yesterday. Smart companies are hiring all the time. So this kind of rush job to get someone in and done, I think is going to shift a bit, right? And so, and the good news is if you're doing that, you're not racing a clock and you're not potentially killing necessary steps to meet that clock, right? I think when I interviewed at Hired, I had 60 hours by the end of it. And so again, it depends on the type of job you're looking for. But definitely don't cut out the quality to meet a metric.
Yeah, do you remember closing dates for roles when that was a thing? That used to be a thing, like, oh, you can't have the job now. No, we've not filled it, but you can't have it. You were a day late. There's not a hiring manager in the world that wouldn't go, oh, a day late, but he's great. Come on, let him in. Like that, So strange things. No, adding the right candidate experience.
You don't want to go on forever, but that's a different issue, right?
Adding good candidate experience won't slow you down. That's what we've got to. Next one. Companies have to appear perfect to candidates during the interview process for them to be interested. Kelly, do you want to take this one first? I'm yakking.
Absolutely. So I think anyone who knows me, authenticity is kind of my number one. I think candidates are voting with their feet, right? They won't work for companies they don't believe. They'll leave companies they don't believe. And I think especially in early stage companies, we all know, I think most of us have been in those kind of 100 scaling quickly, businesses changing every 3 months. The perfect company does not exist. And if I'm interviewing for one of these, especially an early stage company that's just innovating and failing fast and doing cool stuff, they're not perfect, right? And if I go in and talk to them and they try to appear too buttoned up and perfect, that's a red flag for me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's good to pick on something that isn't what the candidate wants and to offer it up to them, to show a failure, to show something that isn't perfect and isn't along with their expectations. It can be a technical thing. It can be, oh my God, yeah, we still use Jira. I hate it too. It can be something like that, like a technical thing they don't want to use. Don't use a really bad example. I was going to say something, but I won't. But if you have something like that, which is, oh, that's a bit annoying, but everything else looks great, you're giving them a con, which means they won't be looking for one. This seems a bit manipulative, but it means they won't be looking for the bad in everything else because you've given them something. It also adds credit to your authenticity later on, because if you're that person, then you have the authenticity. Well, they admitted that to me. Maybe that is the highest they can go on the salary. So you get this kind of, you're adding credence to yourself. Now, remember, the recruiter has one foot in the organization, one foot outside the organization. So you're this mixture, weird hybrid. If you're doing it badly, they'll see you as totally belonging to the organization and that you're there to screw them out of the salary. You're trying to get them for as cheap as possible for the maximum amount of work. That's not the great recruitment role that I wanted to do. It was always, I'm on your side and their side. Let's get to a win together. This is how we're going to do it. This is what we've got to offer. And you just very much sort of, everything's out on the table.
Great.
Cool. So
Right.
Companies may take for granted a candidate's interest in that company. It's a buyer's market. Kelly?
Yes. So for this one, I think we all know it's tough out there, and candidates have their choice. I think for me, there's 2 points, right? And so a lot of interview teams, especially less seasoned, right, more junior interviewers, will kind of take the robotic approach, and they have their 10 questions and they're taking notes and they're just kind of going through it. And the more that you can help equip the whole interview team to actually feel comfortable talking about the company, being personable, having those skill sets to actually talk about and sell the mission, right, the vision, the business, in a very holistic way, almost as if they're, the CEO going out on out raising a round. Like, the more you can train folks to have that business acumen and talk about the whole, candidates love that. And so I think for me, candidates, of course, should be prepared to be grilled in an interview, to so to speak. But I've seen more and more now that it's almost an expectation for them to also be inspired by the team, the company, and the mission they're choosing where to go. So.
Yeah, 100%. You smashed that. I don't think I can add much to that. That's like the perfect answer.
I actually put that sentence down last night, and I was like, "That's a good one."
Yeah. That'll take away. Matt won't have anything to say to this. I'm not sure I believe that there's a war for talent in the McKinsey way that they talk about it anymore. I think if you're good at what you do, you're always going to find people will be attracted to you. But in this exact case, they are going to have, you are noticeably wrong if you think they've got no other job offers. If you think they're pinning all their hopes to you, that's very weird. And I'd proceed in that way. So who are you selling against? What else are they being offered? It's something that perhaps the recruiter can uncover as you go through the process as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Right, where are we next? It's a buyer's market.
The buyer's market.
Okay, you can't measure improvements. You can't measure improvements to make candidate experience. Kelly? Or I can go.
I'm thinking. No, you go ahead, start, Matt. I know you.
My hot take is yes, you can. So the way I've done it before, anyone who got to a meaningful stage in our interview process, we sent them an NPS. It was, would you recommend us as a place to work? And then because they were already answering a question, we asked them 3 sneaky other ones about the speed of the process, the communications from the recruitment team and the comms from the interviewers. What did they feel like? So it's click, 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 click. 4 clicks for them, very easy. But what we could see is that when we could change something, when we could measure something, we would see that. You can also see it in reports. If you have a really bad assessment that everyone drops out of, you get rid of it, suddenly you'll see people flowing through that process, that kind of stuff. So absolutely, you can measure it.
Yeah, I mean, my ad there, and again, this goes to the org development kind of HR side of my brain, is don't underestimate the qualitative. I think the metrics are great. The 4 clicks are great. We all sometimes just kind of, right, neutral. And so don't underestimate the power of a conversation and that anecdotal feedback. Even if you do a sampling of it, I think that can augment and help the quantitative a lot.
Go for it. Companies underestimate how many people a candidate will tell about their experience, bad or good. This is the old adage about if you have bad service in a restaurant, how many people do you tell? Who's been on like TripAdvisor or something like that? Glassdoor is our industry's example of this. They will tell everyone. They will tell everyone, and it's not just the people who are angry enough to write it down, because you could argue that the people who are angry enough to write it down are an aberration. They've gone too far. They're obviously completely mad because they've taken to the internet to say horrible things. But there's still the people who go, they tell their roommate, they'll tell their families, they'll tell the other guys at work, guy interviewed there, it was terrible. So they will tell people if it's bad. They'll tell less people if it's good, I think.
Yeah.
Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies view this as they take the defensive, right? They're going to tell everyone, so let's make sure. And we think about that as the offense, right? So no matter what, no matter if that candidate wants to be at your company or not, or you want them or not, right? Make them feel fantastic. I think this is a total missed opportunity. I mean, every candidate that comes in your door is part of your brand marketing team. And they really will. They'll tell people on Slack, text, this, that. I mean, having a new job is a big life event. And so I'm sure that candidates tell 10 friends. They're about, not just after, but hey, I'm going to go interview at Workable today. Great, tell me how it goes. And they follow up. And so you can pretty much guarantee that candidate, passively or not, or is going to tell at least 5 to 10 people. And that's a good thing, right? And so that's where I feel very passionate about this whole notion of, which all you engineers love to do, is cutting off interviews and sending people home early.
Yeah.
I understand the argument on the waste of time and this and that, and I do agree with that. But I just think it's still a missed opportunity, right? To at least make someone feel great about your company. And I've had people say, hey, I didn't get the job, but I loved it. And I told 3 friends how great it was.
And I've had sort of anecdotally people who have failed the interview once, come back 6 months later and absolutely aced the interview and gone on to be brilliant.
Yeah, again,
so they have to leave with a good impression. Yeah,
exactly. I always say early stage companies, if you don't like change, don't go to them. These companies are different every 3 to 4 months. The organization changes, the skill set needs changes, the business model changes, all these things shift, and it could be a phenomenal place for someone you rejected 4 months prior.
Right, Erin, I know that there were time short, so we're going to have to rifle through these next ones. Many recruiters don't want to tell the truth. We kind of hit on this one already. I think many recruiters don't want to be 100% authentic or feel that they can't deliver bad news. I think HR mindset is better at doing this, having hard conversations. Recruiters like to be your friend. Kelly?
No, I think it's the right thing as well. And I think that, look, it is a different skill set. And if you're struggling with how, when, or even if, right, to have that conversation, it's not for everyone that you interview. Work with your HR team, and we partner very closely here, and that could be super helpful. Because it's not black or white. It's a very judgment-oriented conversation. Again, whether to even have it, who should have it, how, etc., depending on the situation.
Cool. Go for it. Next one, Erin. Did we go through 2 there? We skipped. Fine. Candidate experience stops once the offer's been made. Absolutely not. So I have seen some brilliant examples of this, and how people have gone on to really win people over. And similarly, how people have been offered other jobs at other companies and then been snaked away during that period to other companies because they've been treated better. So in the past, I've seen, one of the large companies I work for, I can say it's Facebook. We had a budget that was an allowance to send candidates something in the post during that notice period to just keep them at that emotional bite point. So we hired someone from an internet radio company to do something, and we sent him, I think it was a Bluetooth speaker, and it was this pun-laden letter that we sent him, like glad to see that we're singing from the same hymn sheet and all this stuff. It was really horrible puns that we laughed at as we made it up. He loved it. One of the best examples I've seen of this is something we did at ThoughtWorks for ages and ages, which was if you find out that the candidate is about to be a parent, you send a branded onesie to them, and suddenly you're the best person in the world because you've taken notice of some massive event that was happening in their life, and you've actually played it back saying, we care, look, we do care. If you do that genuinely, if you do that authentically, I think that's a brilliant thing to do. But absolutely not. I think there's this dead end that people leave in their process where it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop for them. It might have stopped for you. So it's about that kind of empathy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. What have we got next? There's a difference between following process versus going through a process with someone. Kelly, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, no, this is similar, right? I think, again, being human, right? This isn't an assembly line. This isn't a machine, right? No two people, even for the same role, are alike. And so don't be afraid to kind of bring that out. Of course, not in ways that cross the legal line, but in ways that make them feel like you care about them as a person. Back to the benefits conversation, right? Back to actually improving someone's whole life, not just, making them do a job for a wage.
Yeah, I've seen people refer to, in an ATS, they refer to buckets of people and things like this. I think semantically there's a problem with that sort of affects your mind after a while. These are people, and you're not just sort of meat for the grinder where you're just getting them through this place. I think it goes back to that. If you see yourself as sort of straddling external and internal, you're a coach for them as they go through this process. I think you hit it on there.
Great. Awesome.
Next. I think the next one is, what feedback do you owe a candidate? So most candidates have a really low expectation at this point, and that's that you'll even bother to email them after they've applied, or just say hi, or just acknowledge their existence. For me, I think the further they are in that process, the more you should do to give them actual feedback. If they've invested time, you should invest that and reflect that back to them. So we had like a rough rule of thumb, which was, if you just did a phone screen, I'm probably just going to send you an email to reject you. If you came in, I'm definitely going to give you a call. If you got to second, third stage, I'm definitely going to give you a longer call. It's going to give you concrete feedback. I'm going to give you tips that you can use for next time. So it's this tiered approach where the more time you invest, the more time we're going to give you on the way back.
Yep, I totally agree with the low bar. If you can very regularly answer the question, where am I in process, what's happening? The biggest thing I get is just people feeling like clueless and they don't know what's happening. And the more you can do that, that itself is a great experience that you can't imagine how many companies drop the ball on.
Cool. Next one. The hiring manager should make a job offer instead of the recruiter. This one's in here because I hate this. I absolutely hate this, where they found the person, the hiring manager gets really excited and then wants to jump in at the end and make your offer. And I say your offer because, as the recruiter being on the receiving end, it's like someone stealing home base for you. You made the hit, you ran, and then they do the last little bit, like tag me, and then they run the last little bit. I hate this. So there's a genuine reason why, not just because that's how we value ourselves as recruiters and that's the glory for us, but also there are things in that conversation that you know about that candidate because you've spent so long with them. Think about it. If you found them in the weird ways that I would, or I used to, on like Google Scholar, and I've read their thesis, and now I've found them and I've walked with them all the way through, and I've sent them a baby grow because they're about to be a dad, all the way through this stuff. And now we've got to an offer and someone's going to walk in and go, hey, I offer you this amount of money. It's like, wow, that is a missed opportunity. At the very least, do it together so that you can mute the phone and say, don't say that, and then unmute it. But yeah, I'd be wary of the glory offer that comes at the end.
I'm not going to try and top that.
That's my one. That's the one I rehearsed. Erin, what's next?
Awesome. So we are actually at the end of the hot takes. We had to cut a couple out because we're running over, but we're not quite done yet. We still have Q&A. But before we do Q&A, we just wanted to tell you a little bit more about ourselves in case you are not familiar. So Kelly, why don't you tell the audience a bit about Hired?
Awesome. Again, so to Erin's point, if you all have more questions, feel free to ping us after, anything we can do to help. So like I mentioned, super big fan of Hired, one, because I work here, but two, as a client before coming here. I think some of you may or may not use us, engage with us. If you'd love to learn more about us, let us know. Demos are super helpful. So we basically match, right, that high intensity candidate, right, this top tech talent that wants to work at your company and is ready to accept an offer. And so we accelerate that. We match it super well using AI, but also human curation, and just really partner through that whole process. Pretty cool too, because we're working on helping, especially companies, do this better. So everything we just talked about today, the interview process, we just launched Hired Essential today, which is really helpful, especially in recruiting teams that are kind of needing that boost or low bandwidth. We have interview process guides now that like help you create this off the bat and can give you that nice roadmap to, boost the intro to close rates, create a great experience, get coaching around that, and really make it consistent. And so that's a cool launch. Check it out today. It should be kind of all over our website and blogs, etc.
Awesome. And if you're not familiar, Workable is hiring software. So you can do things like build out your hiring plan, open and post jobs. We have a sourcing tool, many actually, that you can use to find talent. You can communicate with candidates and wrangle hiring manager feedback, which is always a pain point for people, all within Workable. So we make it easy to stay organized, which lets you hire talent faster and give a great candidate experience. So if you would like to learn more about Hired or Workable, I'm going to launch a quick poll here. Let us know if you want a demo, and we will follow up really quickly with you guys afterwards. I'll just leave this open for about 10 more seconds, and then our speakers can actually stay until 2:10, so for about 8 more minutes to answer some Q&A, since you guys have been such an awesome audience. So stick around if you have time to spare, and we can do that. And if we don't get to your question, I will give you Kelly and Matt's, the best way to reach Kelly and Matt at the end. So feel free to ping them afterwards and keep this going, keep the conversation going. Okay, perfect. So let's get back here. Q&A, what have we got? Let me go in and find some of these. All right, so the first one, when you're supporting a company with a poor brand, where would you start to correct the perception, especially when there are multiple internal changes happening that you have to overcome?
Yeah, that's a great one. Putting on the org development hat, that I have, I think rushing that can be dangerous. So I would take time to understand it first, create kind of a strategic plan on who you want to talk to. I would do a sampling of conversations internally, a sampling of conversations with actually alumni, right? Because believe it or not, your alumni is some of the most active network that is perpetuating either the positivity or the negativity of that brand. And if you can actually get them to help you change it, that's going to be even better. And work with the internal leaders on, hey, are you agreeing with this? Do you see this? Because you can't do it alone, right? And so the more you can kind of take those three constituents, connect them together, and kind of change things, the faster things will turn around for you.
I would always enjoy when people had a negative reaction when I called them as like a sourcing call, and they go, "Oh, Facebook, never," or "Oh, high frequency trading, you're all evil," or something like that. And then you'd get into that discussion, and I would only enjoy it because it was an opportunity to actually tweak out what did you mean by that, and then an opportunity to educate a lot of the time. So actually, no, it's not like that. It's more like this, and you would get into a deeper conversation that way. So I'd say use the opportunity of a negative brand as well, especially if you're not in the org development world. Like you don't get the opportunity to do that. Instead, you're just on a phone being tasked with find me 10 developers, because that's a different world. You don't get the chance to do that. You just get a chance to talk one-on-one with people. But use those and have those quality conversations with people.
And just lean into them. It can be really squishy and scary and kind of like, it's a big gray hazy ball. I don't know what even that means, but just keep asking why. And so the more concrete you can get around why exactly that brand is negative, you can work with that.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We have another question here which came up in a couple different ways, but people are wondering how much time you should spend selling your company and its culture versus really measuring people's skills in the face-to-face portion of the candidate experience?
Yeah, I'll start. I think it depends on the candidate, right? So again, if your interview team does really great pre-briefs, if you're really, familiar with those candidates' drivers, you'll kind of know more if they are more hesitant or if they're leaning in. And I think there should be a set amount of time though on the sell, right? Even if you have one person in the interview loop that is really focused on selling that vision, that mission, the business model, it's just good no matter how excited a candidate is. And so I hesitate to put an exact time frame on it, but I say if you at least have one person who's really skilled at doing that, I think that's great.
Yeah, I think in the past it's normally come towards the end, or that the sell has sort of ramped up. So we would always front load with the technical, are you good enough? Are you capable? Like the hard, here, show me a linked list on a whiteboard or whatever it was, would be over here first. They would sweat, they would do the hard stuff first. And then the further they got through the process, it might be that the last part of that process, the last part of their day with us would be meeting a VP or a C-level guy to talk through where's it all going and your part in it. And that way you've got this kind of like logical sell. So we would do like 2 techs and then a culture interview, and that's where you would start to see that sell come in. And then this kind of future with us interview, and it would be, hey, let's talk about you and where this is all going. And so you start to assume that they're already working there as they get through this interview day.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks, guys. We also have a couple more questions about generally like delivering bad news and managing bad feedback. So, if you have people, even though you're trying your hardest and putting all of these into place, even if you still have a couple of people who have a poor candidate experience, how should you deal with those people either on Glassdoor or, giving you poor feedback on the phone?
The more you can, again, genuinely and authentically connect, right, with folks that are the angriest, right? And so you want to, one, just do that to understand and actually respond if someone's that upset. Something obviously happened, but two, you can sometimes turn, a detractor into a promoter, right? Again, so the best way to kind of diffuse, understand, to actually really improve. But also, I've had folks that are so negative and so angry, and they went out and told 10 people that we talked to them, we took action, we did something about it, and those people actually turned into promoters. So my short answer is try to get them on the phone, try to offer them coffee, offer some time.
Yeah, and I'd echo one of the points you made earlier. Verbally is better than trying to write this down, where tone gets involved. So don't get into a sort of an email flame war with people about their impression of a bad experience, because the first thing you have to do is acknowledge that they have a feeling about this. And I was just obeying orders. I was just following process is not going to meet that. So talk to them, understand it first.
I've seen those types of email flare-ups actually show up, right, on Twitter, on Glassdoor, on Facebook. I mean,
Hacker News, every week there'll be one.
Tough.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So that is all the time we have for questions, but I did just put in the chat, if you still have burning questions that you want Matt and Kelly's advice on, the best way to reach Kelly is via LinkedIn. Is that right, Kelly? Sending a message?
Yeah, anytime.
Perfect. So you can message Kelly on LinkedIn. She's Kelly Dragovich. And if you want to reach out to Matt, he is very active on Twitter, and his handle is El Satanico. So.
Oh, come on. I used to be a magician. It was a stage name. Come on. This is hard. You choose one name and suddenly it goes wrong. God.
Well, if you want to message any of them, feel free. They'll answer your questions. Those are the best places to reach them. Check the chat if you're unsure about spelling. And please tune in to the next webinar we have. Thank you so much to Kelly, to Matt, and to Hired for partnering with Workable on this. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. We will be sending out a recording and slides, just so everybody knows.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.